All right. I have a new guest. Caleb is great, by the way. Yeah, Caleb is great. I have a new guest. First time she's on the show. And I want to make sure I get your name right. So please pronounce it for me. Well, no, screw that. I'm going to take the risk. Kayse Melone. Can't hear you, Kayse. Can't hear you. Your mic. You're muted. Try now. You're still muted. Still muted. I can see it. I can see your. Hold on. Let me see if I can help you out. People. Yeah, I can't change it. You're muted on your end.
Is it just technical difficulties?
There you are. There you are.
Okay, now great.
Yeah, yes, you were muted before.
You were close. It's Kayse Melone. So just regular Melone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kayse Melone. Kayse Melone. Mm-hmm. I can remember. I am a butcher of names, so I'm I always try to get it right. Kayse Melone. She runs the Kayse Melone Show. She's described as a podcast for free thinkers, free spirits, covering culture, religion, and politics. Her show comes on Sunday, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time. How are you doing this morning? How are you doing this morning? I had to get my time straight for a moment in my mind.
No, I hear you. We're busy. We're all busy. We're all trying to adjust to time, right? I'm well. It's been a good long weekend for me. I know not everyone gets a long weekend on Labor Day, but you just had a birthday, right?
I did just have a birthday. I am a 48-year-old man now.
48 years young is what I heard.
No, it's old. It's old. August 31st. That was on Sunday, and then for Labor Day we ended up doing the show on Labor Day also.
Okay.
It was good. So far, so good. I can't hate it. It was a bit of a mess for Airbnb on that day, but everything worked out exactly the way I needed or wanted it to. Airbnb, shout out to them for hooking me up. So far, so good. Yeah, it was a good birthday. I can't complain.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Thank you for joining me, by the way. I really do appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you did a show on Chrisian Zionism, and I had the opportunity to watch that show, and I was fascinated by that show. Now, I've had one of my previous guests, you know her actually, Jen Perlman. Jen did this show. She did my show once, and she was talking about how it was growing up as a Zionist. And the audience was riveted by it because it was effectively just brainwashing a child. Like, you're indoctrinating that kid with ideas to such a degree. When that kid grows up, the kid kind of holds those ideas. It's like if you grew up a Christian or you grew up a Muslim or grew up something else. Well, in this case, you're putting pretty hateful ideas into that child, and it takes a while for the child to kind of shake that off. You were talking about growing up as a American, what does it call it? A Christian Zionist, which is always weird to me. Because give me a definition of that before I jump into that. What is a Christian Zionist in the way that you explain it?
Sure. So that's a great starting question. Before I jump into it, love Jen. Jen is great.
Jen is awesome.
Also been on the Revolutionary Change podcast, which was also called Generational Change. Love it.
She got very militant.
Yeah.
Very militant.
Yeah.
She came on the show spitting fire that day. I've known Jen for a while, and I remember when it was a generational change, it was very lighthearted. So, like, as the world got darker, she accommodated that new world.
Yeah, it's like she started burning brighter. Love to see it.
Yes.
So that was a great connection that I made with Jen, and what we kind of found fascinating in our backgrounds and our upbringing is that we were both essentially, as you were saying, raised as Zionists, but mine was not from a Jewish perspective, which one of the really, I guess, kind of oversimplified ways of breaking down the differences between Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism is that one is more political in nature and one is more religious in nature. There are some overlap there. There are political aspects to Christian Zionism, and there are some religious undertones to some, not all, iterations of Jewish Zionism. But that's just still kind of an easily oversimplified distinction there. I kind of use a very general overview in defining Christian Zionism, which is that it is the unwavering support for the exclusive rights to the land in Israel/Palestine for the Jewish people. So for Christians, or I should have started that with saying the Christian support for that exclusive right. And so for Christians, the everyday Christians in this country, around 2/3 of people in the United States would check a box and say that they're a Christian. Now that's a wide umbrella of a million different versions there, right? Denominations, the intensity of one's Christianity, you know, are we talking fundamentalist? Are we talking progressive? There's a whole world.
Yeah.
But in that group of people who would check the box and say, I'm Christian, 55% of them would answer in a survey that they believe that Jesus is coming back to life. And with that belief, okay, with that line of thought.
Is that high? Like that number is that high, 55%?
Oh, sorry. And I said that wrong. It's not 55% of Christians. It's 55% of people in this country. In this country, the population.
Wait. Even non-Christians would
Correct.
say Jesus is coming. How are they non-Christians if they're saying Jesus is
There are some non-Christians, and this is according to I can pull up the link, you know, if we really need to, but this is according to the Pew Research Center. They conducted what they called a religious landscape study across tens of thousands of various demographics throughout the country. And it's, you know, how do you identify? What do you believe? All of your very individual beliefs under your religion. And 55% of people in this country, I mean, the wide majority of those are Christians, right? Like there is huge correlation there. But it's, they believe that Jesus is going to come back to life. Now, my background is that I grew up here in Oklahoma, and I was raised very, very fundamentalist evangelical Christian. And I am not alone in that here in Oklahoma where I am. Yeah. And so I was raised with like full-on sermons and lectures about Armageddon or the end times or when Jesus returns. And I've worked through all of, you know, the personal baggage with all of that. And I've come out on the other side, you know, and I talk about my deconstruction journey a lot online. That's kind of the background of my content, you could say. But what really struck me when I started deconstructing was how harmful and hateful, as you put it well earlier, Christian Zionism is without even realizing it. Okay. Because we grow up in these environments as children being told to support the land of Israel being given to the Jewish people at all costs. And the Palestinians aren't even mentioned. There's no storyline where they're involved. They're not even falsely, you know, equated as the aggressors, etc. So the concept of, I'll wrap it up here, you know, going back to 55% of people in this country believe that Jesus is coming back to life. In order for that to happen, according to biblical theology, in order for him to have the second coming, there's like a very key role that the Jewish people play. And that the role that they play is that they return to the land of Israel, they establish the temple in Jerusalem, and a couple of other things. But one of the points that I really try to get across here is that none of this is like Christian mythology viewing the Jewish people favorably. It's very inherently anti-Semitic. And so that was kind of like why I started talking about it online, because a lot of people in this country are just blindly supporting, they're manipulated into supporting this movement without even understanding the historical aspect of what Zionism actually means from a Christian lens, which was originally very anti-Jewish. Like at its core, it results in like the book of Revelation, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about Christian theological, it's actually called eschatological, which is the study of the end times. Yeah. Whenever we have that lens and we're looking at the book of Revelation, thousands and thousands of Jewish people are essentially required to be sacrificed, is the very nicest way I can put it, in order for the Christian church to be one with Jesus again. And so it's incredibly harmful. It's incredibly harmful in the real world results in the consent for us providing arms and money to Israel for what it's doing in Palestine. And then it's also harmful to the Jewish people because it's the undercurrent there is very anti-Jewish. So it's just a mess of hate that I certainly didn't know when I was a Christian. I was just like, oh, yeah, I'm 13 years old and I'm being told to take a geopolitical stance about something in the Middle East. Yeah, let's go. Absurd, absolutely absurd on its own. And then, of course, the more I've dug outside of the environment I was raised in, I'm realizing like how deep the manipulation goes, how harmful such an ideology is, and how honestly fear-based is what it is. Because we're so taught in that environment, in the really intense evangelical environment, to view the entire world from a lens of fear, okay, which is truly the root of any kind of hatred or bigotry, okay, is fear of whatever. And it really plays on that in such an environment. It really plays on fear. And so you then end up with this hope and this false belief that there's going to be some beautiful reckoning and end times where all of the very valid suffering that people of all walks of life, are experiencing, it'll all be justified. It'll all be reckoned with when Jesus comes back. That gives us a glimmer of hope that things will all work out and then we'll be okay and we don't have to struggle as much. But the requirement for that is all of this violence.
Yeah. So, all right. So my mom, they were in the Christian church, Baptist. It never really took with me. I didn't quite get it. I was the kid that was like, yeah, but why? The pastor was like, you have a very interesting kid here. I wasn't necessarily antagonistic against it. It just didn't entirely make sense. As you point out, it's fear-based, right? They used to do revelations where they would talk about how everybody was effectively going to die or be raised to Jesus and Satan was going to take dominion over the earth. And I'm like, whoa, this is intense. Because it's based on this idea of where God is effectively threatening you, a God that is supposed to be omnipotent, eternal, immortal, etc., created you, knows what your fortune is going to ultimately be, and yet is creating you, some people, with the potential of spending eternity in hell. Like, that's just a mind-blowing concept for me to get. And in regards to the Jerusalem thing, yeah, you're right. They would say the Jews killed Jesus, and they would use that as a black market for hating Jews. But they would support the Jews in Israel with the idea that, well, you need the Jews in order to bring back Jesus, in which case all of the Jews are going to be extinguished. Most of the planet is going to be left, and the good Christians are going to go up to Jesus. And it's like, whoa, that's intense. Like, you're effectively talking about the majority of the world being sacrificed. And that is something that you are breeding red heifers to try to bring to fruition and giving Israel billions of dollars in order to get rid of the Palestinians, in order to bring this vision to life. That's terrifying. Like, that is very dark. And I think, to your point, a 13-year-old in no way can understand the ramifications of any of that. And yet, this is what a 13-year-old is being indoctrinated with. When did you get to the point of recognition of like, whoa, this is a bit over the top? Like, what age were you? When did you finally, what was the thing where you hit your head on, where you were like,
yeah,
this is not right?
Oh, it's almost embarrassing. It took so long, but everyone's journey is different,
Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
raised with it. They
Mhm.
put it this way: most people stick with that stuff their entire life.
That's
Like, you
true.
have family members who are indoctrinated as a kid. They say, I think for myself. It's like, dude,
Mhm.
they beat that into you when you were a child and you just stuck with it. You're not thinking for
Mhm.
yourself. You didn't choose that. You were imposed. It's a difference. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I do try to give myself some grace for essentially being, even as a teenager, not necessarily seeing through the honestly the hatred that was spewed that was again rooted in fear. So it was also very much reinforced at home for me. And a lot of fundamentalist religion is reinforced at home, and that kind of doubles the intensity of such a religious background, religious upbringing. So I also, for a little bit of context, the reason that it was so pervasive kind of in my worldview is because I also went to the Bible-based private school affiliated with a mega church here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I grew up. So it was just all the time. I mean, I was just 24/7. I lived and breathed the Bible, essentially. And at the same time, I was also a very voracious reader. I was very curious. I was a little, school nerd, academic. And I went off to college. And as I was in college, I started reading more and more. Well, I started reading more theology, Christian theology, like C.S. Lewis and A.W. Tozer.
Yeah.
These really like deep thinkers about why Christianity makes sense, right? Well, I found that the more I followed that curiosity, the less the logic held up. And I kind of just had a breakdown of what we call the cognitive dissonance of trying to square absolutely everything in modern reality, in our way of life, the lived experience that we all go through, trying to square all of that with this 2,000-year-old book, give or take, 2,000-year-old book. And I was 21 years old when I remember like walking through campus, college campus, with the recognition that I was no longer a Christian anymore. And I kind of point to that moment as the beginning of my deconstruction journey. And it really hit hard. So one thing I talk a lot about, because a lot of the people who come to my platform have gone through this or are going through it, the deconstruction from we call it a high control religion that just really was so unhealthy. And we talk about how it looks different for everyone. Some people have a capital M moment like myself. But really what I like to try and talk about is how deep the personal identification goes. I didn't know not just whether or not I believed in God, I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know what kind of partner to look for. I didn't know how to build friendships without the lens of evangelical Christianity. And that to me is what really took a whole decade of, and it's still going, it's just a never ending journey of self-discovery, which is kind of a beautiful part of life for all of us. Self-discovery.
Wait, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. That is fascinating to me. I mean, there's always a workable point of view that a person gets, and it could either be imparted or the person could kind of develop it and work their way through. Like, what do I feel in this case? And it kind of shapes a point of view, or it can be imposed, right? This religion gives me a workable point of view. This political thing gives me a workable point of view. How did it go all the way to the level of clothing? I'm fascinated by that. So as a Christian, you dressed a particular way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are denominations that were much stricter than mine. I find it really uncomfortable when a lot of American Christians hate on Islam for wearing the hijab or the modesty that is required of women, and we do not have to get into that. But there are denominations that require, you've seen the long dresses that the women wear, okay, yes. And they don't cut their hair. There's a requirement for the women to dress a certain way. So those are specific denominations. Mine was not quite that strict, but it was still a level essentially of modesty and how I wasn't allowed to show my shoulders at school. And I mean, that's just a very basic dress code. But really what I meant by it had me questioning what I should wear was really, it started having me question my relationship with my own body, because the nature of the Christian point of view of the body is that it is inherently sinful and that it is inherently full of lust. And for women in particular in purity culture, we are not just responsible for our purity, but also for those of the male gaze, for not bringing our brothers in Christ to temptation. Right. So it just had me questioning at the very least, like, is my body sinful? Is my natural body, is there something wrong with it? Right? So there's a lot, like, it got to the point where at some point I remember like brushing my teeth and I was like, why am I doing this? It really breaks down an entire identity of of how we move through this world, which can in the end be beautiful, because then you can start what I call reconstruction and rebuilding that identity and finding our authentic selves and who we actually are, what we want to stand up for, etc. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, effectively, who am I?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, that can be a beautiful process, but it honestly took 10 years of those very fundamental questions of who is Kayse? What do I believe? What do I want to stand up for? Before I was even able to kind of look at the political landscape, right? Like it's kind of a survival mode for some people. I think it was for me, because I really had to question a lot of those very internal, deep questions. And then it's in the past couple of years that I was kind of looking around and I was like, okay, so now how can I move through this world? So now how can I go out there and be of service to people and help other people along this journey, which was so intense and many places dark for me, because I just had no guidebook anymore. I had no easy answers. This was hard. This was a hard process to question the indoctrination I grew up with. How can I help others do the same? And through this kind of self-educating process, through this curiosity that I've always had, as we mentioned earlier, I stumbled across like, wait. I want to say, I don't know if stumbled across is the right word. After October 2023, when this new kind of iteration of what is framed as the conflict between Israel and, Palestine, it kind of came to more of the forefront of a lot of people's perceptions again. It reminded me like, oh, I was told to be a Zionist, right? Like that word Zionism. I was like, well, I was a Zionist. I grew up as a Zionist. What does this mean? So it was kind of like another key point that I had to really question, like, okay, so what do I believe? What are the facts? What is the information that's actually available that's not skewed through this fundamentalist ideology? Because let's keep in mind, I had to teach myself science and history as an adult. Okay, like I didn't know what evolution really was about, okay, until I was an adult and learned it myself. So I did this same kind of self-education for what's going on in Palestine. And I had to question, like, okay, what do I believe? This is just a personal part. Not everyone who goes through deconstruction becomes an atheist, but I ended up an atheist. So it's like, I don't believe there's some God that gave the Jewish people this specific slot of land. So what do I believe? All of these different questions that really challenged this whole inner dialogue of what I used to believe and what I'm trying to establish for myself now. And it just got me down this rabbit hole of all of the ways that Zionism is pushed through church congregations without the actual details, without the actual facts, to manufacture this entire world of consent, this religious skew to a geopolitical conversation. And yeah, that's kind of like the rabbit hole I've been in this entire year.
That's fascinating. I'm sitting here thinking through it. That's fascinating. It's a few thoughts. Christianity and atheism are basically the same. They're not the same, but there are two ends where there's still this kind of intense belief, either that there is no God or that there is a God and there's all of these other things that are associated with God, if that makes sense. It's interesting that I understand why you would, at the point where you say, okay, I've been lied to my entire life. They've lied to me. And you come to this realization of, okay, well, now that I've been lied to, well, what is true? How do I know what's true? How do I know who I am, since this was my identity for all of these years? That is fascinating. I can understand this kind of, this deconstruction and then this rebuilding into who is Kayse. What do I actually believe in? And not just what do I believe in, what is my workable point of view of the world? Like, how do you define what's right and what's wrong when this has been taken away from you? You now have to structure it on your own. And when you're looking at the Palestinian issue, because you could have come to any worldview, you could have said, yeah, the Palestinians are attacking the Israelis and they need to defend themselves. Plenty of people end up in that kind of weird space. It's like, dude, but they're murdering all of these people. They're starving 2 million people. Yeah, but the Palestinians deserve it. You'd be shocked. There was 1 or 2 people on the channel that would even do some nonsense like that. But you didn't come to that conclusion. Your thing was, okay, I see the origin of this. I see what they are doing. I was raised in this kind of Zionistic belief set that I found to be incorrect, or at the very least to be deeply problematic and deeply injurious, especially when you're growing up with it. Meaning, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. You're structuring your world as you go along, considering this other part of your world has just fallen away. And you're coming up with a new workable point of view of the world as you recreate yourself. That is fascinating. That is heavy to have to go through. And I guess I never really thought of it being that. Yeah, I never thought of it being that much that thoroughly jarring of an experience in the way that you're explaining it. But I can see how it would be if that's your life, that's your identity. Your identity has been stripped away. Mm-hmm. Wow. I would imagine you've met other people along this journey who've dealt with this also. How have they, oftentimes people appreciate when somebody else is enunciating something that they themselves are experiencing. What has been the response to you explaining this? What was your family's response? I mean, I would imagine your family was horrified.
That's a good question. Thank you. The family one is tricky. I'm not as close with my parents as I would like to be, and family's hard for a lot of people right now. I think a lot of the family dynamics in this era is just getting reshuffled, and we're really challenging those traditional narratives. Yeah. So I'm certainly not alone in that. But like kind of half of my family doesn't really know about my online presence. And then those who do are generally supportive, even if they don't agree with every little thing I say. But as far as the community I've built on this platform, so like my first YouTube video was on my birthday this year, February 9th. And we have grown to, I think, 36,000 subscribers in those 7 months. And I have been so grateful, first and foremost, for the community members that I have met along the way, the friends we make along the way, right? And so I have found a lot of really, okay, so I'll tell it this way. I get a lot of hate mail, which, you have a public platform as well. It's part of the game. Yeah. A lot of hate mail. I'm not talking about very chill stuff, so I get it. I'm talking about pretty controversial stuff. I get it. But I would say maybe like 10% of the emails I get are incredibly heartfelt and kind messages of thanks. Like, hey, I've been trying, as you were just saying, I've been trying to put a voice to this, or I'm just starting on this journey of deconstruction and I'm afraid of hell, and I don't know how to let go of my belief of hell. Or, hey, I have come to this realization that I'm not a Christian anymore. How do I tell my wife, who is still a Christian? Those are the really meaningful conversations that have meant a lot to me. And it's been really beautiful. And all different, again, what I was saying earlier, all different versions of this. Yeah. There are people who were Jehovah's Witnesses and they deconstructed. There are people who were like a different denomination of Christianity, or just really, really, really Catholic. And I think, what you were saying earlier, like, you're right. I do call out the atheist community who end up kind of on the far right of the spectrum, politically speaking, because I think there's a general, a lot of it is still fear-based, but there's a general, there can be a tendency to swing all the way to the other side of the pendulum. Yes. And kind of be wrapped around kind of what you were saying earlier about atheism and Christianity being on the two ends of a spectrum. And it's like, they can be wrapped around a dogmatic approach to science, which science is not a belief system. Science is a process. It is a scientific method. Exactly. But it is very easy to go from a high demand religious environment and just like latch on to science as your new version of that and feel very justified. So there's a lot to this whole concept of deconstruction. And when you start talking about the political aspect, it can be, everyone falls into different camps as well. I think the large majority of people on my platform and my community and myself ended up very, very distrusting of mainstream establishment. Okay, because Christianity is technically the mainstream narrative in this country. Yeah. So that's kind of like where I ended up. I would not call myself a liberal, like further left than that, which is just a general, I mean, being on the left means you believe in community ownership of property, right? Not necessarily I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I can't stand Democrats. In fact, I don't like either,
Yeah.
to be bluntly honest with you. I tend to be far on the left spectrum
Yeah,
of things.
yeah.
So no, I get you on that. Now I'm fascinated by this. Like my uncle, like I'm not an atheist, not a Christian. I have belief in like consciousness stuff, but I can't denote
honestly,
that
same.
as a religion thing. And I gotta be honest, I think the more honest just thing is I just don't know.
Yeah, same.
And I can be okay with I don't know. I had a friend of mine who I remember her and I were getting mani-pedis one day. I like spas. And I was like, I know you don't believe this stuff. I was like, why do you do this? Why do you invest yourself into this? And she says, well, if I didn't believe in this, what else would I believe in? Effectively, she was staring into the void and backed away from the void and was like, I need something to latch onto. This is too heavy to just not believe in anything. I had an aunt-in-law who also was very religious. And I would call what they were involved in was a cult. They would call it Christianity. We can disagree on what it was, but gotten to the point of ostracizing other people. Like the kids can't listen to music because that's worldly. The kids can't play cards because that's the devil laughing at you as you play cards. And of course, she had a husband who was not that way and ended up creating these huge divisions in the context of the marriage. Like, this stuff is destructive. I mean, the story that you talked about where you said the person was, I'm afraid of going to hell. That's terrifying. That sucks. And this is an argument I've had with my mom. It's like you're leveraging a person's belief set against the unknown. And you're creating this kind of fear thing within the context of the unknown of burning in hell eternally, unless you believe what we're telling you to believe in. That's a hell of a thing to do to a child. Where that child grows up with that thing stuck in their minds. That's rough. That is rough. What did you tell that person when they said, be like, look, I don't think I'm a Christian. I don't think I buy this stuff entirely, but I don't want to go to hell. What was that? I know you can't go into the entirety of the conversation, but I am curious on how did you counsel a person who says something like that? That's so esoteric.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that you ask it in such a way. How did I counsel that person? Because I have felt that I just have become in this position of people asking me for advice. And, you have to say, I'm certainly not a therapist. I'm not a licensed professional, all of that. But I think there is something too when, as you can probably relate, when you come online and you have a field of expertise and you know what you're talking about, people do come to you with all of these questions. And that has been both challenging and just very impactful for me, because that's why I do this. At the end of the day, if there is one person who is leaving a high demand religion and they find peace and their journey of deconstruction is a little bit easier than mine, it's a win. It's all a win, right? So those are the most impactful moments for me. That's all I'm here for. And so for that person in particular, the question of I'm afraid of letting go of my belief in hell, I mean, really what I get to at that point is like, who is that belief serving? Because that's something that I ask all of us at any point, especially in today's climate. That belief that you have, who is it serving? Is it someone with a lot of power and money? Okay. Is the belief in upholding the greed of capitalism, is that serving you? That's just a genuine question. That's a really good starting point for any of our beliefs that might feel uncomfortable, is who is this serving? Who is the belief that I would be happiest serving a husband in the kitchen and popping out children? Who is that really serving? And it's not a judgment thing. It's sitting with our internal beliefs and becoming aware and recognizing, hey, this might have been intentionally programmed into my subconscious to serve someone else's purposes. Okay? Because and the difficulty with that is kind of recognizing like, oh, maybe there's part of my identity that isn't really me. And that's a scary thought to have that awareness. So what I ask this person is like, is it serving you to believe in hell? Is there something about believing in hell that makes you a better person? Or do you think that you can still be a good, kind, honest person without the threat of an eternity of torture? Do you think that this makes you a good person is really what I got down to? Or do you think maybe your fear is holding you back from being your true self? And I truly believe this. I think people are genuinely good.
Yeah.
And it's just when they're afraid and these systems don't allow them to live fully and freely and healthily, we're lashing out, right? And so I remember kind of asking that person, who does the belief in hell serve? Okay, is it a belief that's just keeping you in line so that religious leaders can tell you what to do? Because that's another part of this is the hierarchy of beliefs in an organized religion. You're going to church on a Sunday and you are outsourcing. I'm not talking about you personally, but we are outsourcing our sense of morality. We are allowing someone else to tell us what is right or wrong according to this book. We are allowing someone to interpret this entire reality and tell us what our values are and tell us what these scriptures mean and who is truly a believer and who is technically not. Okay? We are outsourcing our sense of morality and our critical thinking. And one of the more tense questions I ask people who are more combative toward my content is, hey, do you really need the Bible to convince you that murder is wrong, for example? Do you really need your pastor to convince you not to steal? And they'll and it's like, it's not a judgment thing, but I'm trying to get to the point across, no, I think you're actually a good person and you didn't need that book in the first place. You didn't need someone to tell you not to commit harm. And so I think that when we release our need for the belief in hell, for example, we realize oh, I actually didn't need that the whole time. That's kind of what it boils down to.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I think that I have discovered that I might be a bit of a consequentialist when it comes to my philosophical worldview, which is what is the point of this? Who is this serving? Because that's something that I talk about a lot, because there are Christians on my platform. And I will say, for example, I will say I am an atheist, but I will stand in solidarity with a Christian who is standing up for what's right. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what you believe. I care what it translates to, right? So in that sense, I guess I'm a bit of a consequentialist.
What is the biggest opposition that you get on this? I'm because you said 10% of the emails are really heartfelt, and that would mean that a lot of them are not. And I have this sneaking suspicion that these people were raised into something, and they believe they're thinking for themselves. Like, for example, I'm in Indonesia as we speak. I can hear the prayers coming. I love the prayers in the mornings and in the evenings. Women wear hijabs, some don't. Same thing in Malaysia. You had some in burqas, some wear hijabs, some didn't. You just kind of had this mix of people that were interacting together. In Christian societies, they oftentimes latch themselves onto these religions very strongly. They were raised in the church. Their moms took them to church or dads took them to church, and they did this for the entirety of their childhood. They grow up and they say, well, I'm choosing to be a Christian. And I would point out, no, you're not. You were raised in this way. You were indoctrinated in this way. You were programmed to be this, and you just stuck with the programming. You never had this moment where you were external from it all and said, I'm going to choose this or I'm going to choose that. They never see the difference. They're fish in water. So when they're attacking you and you know they're fish in water, what is their biggest issue? Is it just because you've ripped yourself away from it? Is it because you're kind of making this channel about, look, I had to deconstruct from this. This is harmful. This is not something that we should effectively be beating into our kids. What is their main opposition to you when they're complaining?
Yeah, that's a good question. It kind of depends on the audience. So I kind of call myself a spiritual atheist sometimes, in the sense of kind of what you were saying earlier. I think there's a lot more room for the nature of consciousness and a very meditative and almost a spiritual way of moving through the world, even though I don't see the evidence for a creator being is really What I mean by atheist, I also like am technically an agnostic, right? I don't know. I don't see the proof, whatever.
I don't know.
And so it's interesting because I would say the majority of the pushback on the things I say are from religious fundamentalists, mostly Christian, also a lot of Muslims, particularly because of when I talk about because when I talk about Christian Zionism, I do a lot of trying to push back against the harmful narrative of painting Islam as somehow worse than Christianity. And so there's this whole like tension of, I guess it's not really much like combative messages from Muslims. It's more like a lot of proselytizing, a lot of evangelizing, trying to get me to see the way of Islam. And I get a lot of that in Christianity as well. But the majority of the more hateful pushback I get is certainly fundamentalist Christian, like hands down. But I also get it from a lot of atheists who don't like that I stand up for the Palestinians, who don't like that I stand up for trans people. You know, like there's a camp of right-wing atheists who kind of don't like that I'm out here calling myself an atheist and I'm a little bit more of a liberation focused slant to it. So I get a lot from all different a lot. It's controversial conversations. So I get it.
That's wild. That's just wild to me. Like, these people can't just say Kayse is doing her own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No. I think also, like, I hate to say it, but I think also there's part of being a woman with such intense opinions being vocalized. That's part of it, because a lot of them also have a gender-based tone to them.
They're men. They're men. Yeah. What is this woman telling me to do? Why is this woman talking about this? How dare she?
I know.
She's supposed
how dare
to be,
she?
Hidden behind a wall somewhere. Wow, that is mind-blowing to me. From your point of view, and what's the Christian Zionist thing? Like, when you extricated yourself from this, you could see Zionism on some level for what it is. I mean, granted, it's different than, let's say, how Jen was raised. It's raised in a different shade, a different color. But it's still the slavish devotion to Israel, even if the reason and rationale is for the destruction of the world. It's still this kind of weird slavish devotion to Israel. Did you guys, when you were growing up, have a political component to that, or was this purely in a religious context?
Well, that's one thing that I mention, even outside of Christian Zionism specifically, is how deeply political my religious upbringing was. I mean, I was in high school when Obama came to office, and in my Bible class at school, we had a genuine conversation about whether or not he was the Antichrist. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. Oh, 100%. All of these very political conversations were happening. So, like, there's this premise that because pastors or religious leaders from the pulpit legally technically can't endorse specific political parties or candidates, that there's no political conversations. Well, that's not a rule in the Bible class. That's not a rule in my chapel that we when we met in high school every Thursday morning. You know, like, we were having all kinds of political conversations. It was deeply political, and Zionism was one facet of that. Interestingly, it wasn't really painted as political, right? Zionism specifically was not painted as anything other than this is what the Bible says. So that's what we do. We quote Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. That means Israel. That means we support Israel no matter what. That's it. That was the end of the conversation. And so that's why, like what I was saying, these past couple of years, I started hearing the word Zionism again. And I was like, wait, hold on. I know it. I remember that word. Had to do some digging, and it's like, oh, we were being told to take a geopolitical stance at 13 years old. And so but even outside of Zionism, deeply, deeply political indoctrination in that religious upbringing, which is why I kind of push back on a lot of the comments or, a hate that I get, which is like, just because you were raised a Christian conservative doesn't mean that's what Christianity means. It does. Like on such, if we have such a wide overlap of the percentage of conservatives and the percentage of Christians overlapping, like, there's something deeper going on in that indoctrination process. And it was deeply political. It just was.
Mike Huckabee,
Mhm.
Hegseth,
Mhm.
like all of these people who are in the Trump administration at this point. Many of
Mhm.
those people are Christian Zionists, lunatics,
Mhm.
degenerates in the way that they effectively um, don't care about life, which is mind blowing. You know, it's
Mhm.
like, how are you a Christian while simultaneously okay with babies being shot and then called dangerous in order to justify the murder of babies?
Mhm.
And yet, in their minds, this is somehow godly and perfectly okay in a religious political context. It's bizarre. Kayse, you are fascinating. Um, that is a hell of a journey to go through. And I guess for me, I never went through that specific journey. This, because for me, it never was. My family was religious, and I even went to religious middle school, not middle school, elementary schools. But even then, it didn't stick. Like I would have straight A's, and I think I got kicked out. It's just like it just never clicked. It never made sense to me. I remember one day our teacher told us, "You're all going to hell." Now, mind you, were like 8. She got pissed off at something we were doing in class. She's like, "You're all going to hell. You're all going to hell. You're going to be on that train going to hell." No, that's a hell of a journey, especially when you make it your identity and you hold on to that identity up until the age of like 21 years old, where you are formed as an adult. You've gone through school, everything else, and you're now in the world functioning in this way with that particular identity. And then it completely and entirely unravels. And you have to recobble that back together. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. Last point of view, if it's something I didn't ask, if it's something you want to get across, please, you have the stage.
Sure. Well, first, let me just say thank you. This has been incredibly insightful. You're an excellent interviewer. Um, I will say,
I interrupted you far too much in this. I
no,
was
no, no,
just
no. That means it's organic. I love it. Yeah. Um, I will say that the reason I got started building a platform to kind of share these perspectives, show the research I've done, etc., is because with the new United States administration, I saw, I'm certainly not alone, but in seeing the rise of Christian nationalism, I became genuinely concerned. And I think that for a lot of people who were raised in these deeply religious and therefore deeply political environments, we started seeing some signs of the new United States administration veering toward becoming more intertwined openly, not just background money going on, openly identifying with Christian nationalist tendencies.
yes.
And I have been concerned, and that is kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I would have loved to just, buy a cabin in the woods and hang out the rest of my life, but I couldn't. And as you know, when you feel called to do something, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and Christian Zionism is a facet, I think, of Christian nationalism that is particularly more just openly harmful and violent. But it's all the same conversation, which is this intertwining, this very intentional and evident intertwining of politics and religion in this country that I'm very concerned about. And I think that really the church congregation members who are just blindly going along with this, I think there's a trickiness there. Like there is a level of accountability who are supporting for those who are supporting all of this harm and violence and hate. But I know the people that I was raised with and grew up with in those environments, and I consider a lot of them in a lot of ways victims of this trillion-dollar propaganda machine. So it's very important to me. I even try and like rein in my community who are like amazing and supportive and perfect and love them. But there's this tendency to continue the process of othering, of us versus them, right? With Christian conservatives or just anyone on the other side of any argument that you have. And really what I would love to get across always and forever is the shared humanity and the fact that we are all in this. And the more we have this divisive rhetoric, I can call out Christianity all day long. I can talk about it in my sleep. But I will stand in solidarity with Christians, the individuals, the people, the humans behind it. Okay? I think there's a level of awareness that I would love for us all to come to, which is that we're all facing this stuff together, and it is scary out there. And people who are kind of swallowing the lies the most are in a lot of ways in more pain than us. That's really tricky. I'm not like trying to not hold people accountable for like the way they vote or, you know, the way they move through this world. It's just a matter of recognizing that we're all in this together, and I want to kind of find a way out. I really do.
No, I accept that. It's I don't know a way out. I think it all
Yeah, me
collapses
neither.
before we get a way out. I mean, I think it's a mechanical process. I think the country, because look, I agree with you. It is a very bizarre thing for a president that seems to be in the pocket of somebody else. And one of my guests the other day, he was like, I think he's being blackmailed. And it's like, I don't know if he's being
100%.
blackmailed, but I mean, the previous administration was almost as obsequious. And it's like, if you think about it, okay, well, Joe Biden did pretty much anything that Netanyahu did. In fact, Channel 4, when they did the review after the Biden administration failed, they were talking behind the scenes, basically some of the things that the Israelis politicians were saying. It's like, thank God that God saw fit to put Joe Biden in office. He didn't push us on anything. He didn't ask us to do anything. He allowed the killing to just keep going and going and going. We thought we'd be able to murder babies for a few months, but with Joe Biden, he allowed us to do it for years. And of course, that breeds impunity of action, not to mention you have policy to overthrow Syria, which allowed attacks on Iran, the expansion of this kind of greater Israel that they're trying to create with the US being firmly behind it. The thing is, though, a lot of this stuff is political. They may come up with a justification for it, and they may wrap people into ways of supporting it. But there's a political ethos in the American political structure, Democrat and Republican, that is perfectly okay with having this colony being our rogue stalking horse. And it's not rogue at all in this case. It's just our ability to show influence within the context of the Middle East. And so they wrap it into all of these things as if it's this kind of religious argument. This isn't a religious dispute. It's a land dispute. They want the land. And so I feel you on this, like the way that they entrance the public by religiousizing it. And that I butchered that word, by making it mystical in a way that it's not. No, I totally agree with you.
It's manufactured consent.
It is manufactured consent. I just can't believe, though, that these are people that raise their kids. These are people that love their kids, meaning the people who you grew up with. I know they love their kids. I know they love their parents. I know they have relationships with each other. How does that not extend? Especially even if you're talking about a Christian Zionist, Christian is built into that. The poor, the sick, these are elements of Christianity that are indivisible from the premise of it. Like Jesus overturned the moneylenders, right? How do you ignore that in the context of the way you operate in the world? And then you have the Zionist part onto it. And it's like, okay, well, the Zionist part ignores all of this other stuff that we're supposed to learn as Christians. How does that? I just don't get how that works and how in their minds they justify that. That's the part that is wild to me. All of these elements of Christianity that goes into this notion of progressivism of sorts in the truer sense of the word, not in the political sense of like Democrats, just
Right.
the basic elements of humanity. I want to treat people like I want to be treated, and the poor, the sick, etc. All of these things need to be taken care of as human beings. It makes us better people, and not to mention God likes it. And then ignore all that when, hey, Israel put 300 bullets in a 12-year-old. Yeah, fair game. I mean, it's Israel. We have to support Israel. How does one negate completely the other in this case? How did they square this in your church? I'm sorry, I know I said that was going to be the end. Just one last question. How did they square this logic? Because I remember I met this woman who had a sign saying Obama is evil because Obama likes gay marriage. And I'm like, what? It's not that I even support Obama, right? It's just this notion that you're making a distinction between Romney and Obama, and of all the things, the car elevator, the guy being rich, the guy calling half of the country the worthless eaters and all this stuff, but you're focusing on the gay marriage. That's your focus. That's the thing that you're focusing on. How is Christian Zionism ignoring the Christian part and raising the Zionism part to the point where it ignores all of these other aspects of Christianity that are actually positive? Or do they ever square that?
Yeah, it is honestly heartbreaking to watch people just buy into this propaganda machine that allows for this genocide to happen. And the truest answer is probably I'm not completely sure, but my gut tells me that it's very much part of an intentional. So there are correlations between the nature of religious fundamentalism in a nation and like material scarcity in a given
Right.
nation. So the more that essentially fascism or material scarcity gets clamped down on this country, my prediction is that religious fundamentalism will rise. There's a direct correlation there. And so the less we keep people in this country educated, the more we force them to work, the less they're able to spend time with their loved ones or people who are different than them, the more we keep them in these social media echo chambers without ever challenging their beliefs, right? The worse quality of life we give people in this country, which is still by and large, we're incredibly privileged compared to the rest of the world. But the more we clamp down control, the easier these people are to control, right? And so I think there are leaders in this people in power in this country who are using that, the nature of late stage capitalism, kind of constricting all of us and not giving us access to education and resources, et cetera, to continue manufacturing this consent. And so when people are more focused on putting food on the table, they're not going to question their religion, their pastor. You know, they don't have time. They're busy. They're busy working 3 fucking jobs. Sorry, excuse me. They're busy working 3.
You can say fuck
Yeah,
all you
sorry. We didn't
you
talk
want.
about whether or not you swear on your channel.
But I do remember being in church, and I do remember this notion of these elements of Christianity, you know, taking care of the poor, taking care of the sick, ensuring the 10 commandments, do unto others as thou should do unto you, do not kill, do not steal, do not murder, you have a list of things, effectively, the basic instructions of being a human being in order to, and that's not purely a religious thing. There's behaviors that you take rationally because you want the world to be a particular way. So I get that, right? That's defensible. How does that get ignored? That's the part that blows me away, because that's an ethical issue. That's a moral issue.
True.
And you go to
Very
church with the notion of moral. How do I save my soul? A. Lincoln James used to be like, he used to sweat so hard and used to beg people to come to Jesus. And you could feel his pain as he tried to get people to come to Jesus. I used to appreciate that, right? It's like, I used to enjoy the preaching. I used to hate everything else because I didn't understand why these people are singing in this way to some mythical being. But in the case of this, though, it's amazing to me that they would say, we believe in Jesus, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the church. And then they would also say, it is okay to murder and starve 2 million people. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
The connection.
I think you're right. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like, I do think that there is an inherent goodness to people. Okay. I think that we don't need to be told to care for our neighbor. Okay. I don't think we need to be told to not commit violence and harm. I think that we are innately good. I think that there is very traceable money behind the intertwining of politics and religion through the Family National Council or Council of National Policy. There was so much money poured into evangelical Christianity on behalf of the Republican Party, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, all of these televangelists, money to shift the narrative of what you were talking about, those core, what I would say, human values, to shift it into an us versus them narrative. Originally, white supremacy, then eventually also women, then eventually also gay people. You know, like they're always they have to have an other, they have to have a them to be an us, and it's this way of garnering control and power. But I guess the easiest answer to this is all the money behind convincing these pastors to teach in a certain way. Pastors can download an app that plugs them into the narratives and specific messages that the Republican Party wants them to say. Like it's totally pervasive and it's very intertwined.
Kayse, this has been a fascinating interview. No, it really has. Look, I'm fascinated by other people's experiences, like how they process the world. and the things that they go through in the context of processing the world, especially in the context of identity and how that identity is shaped. And when you get a situation where that identity is broken in many respects, and I have to be cobbled back together and trying to figure out, okay, who am I? Beyond all this other stuff, who am I? Because I think there's a human element in people that goes beyond religion. I think religion's always surface. Like if I'm in Egypt and you see a kid watching porn, and you're like, okay, well, religion's the overlay. He got needs, right? he's watching it, despite the religion saying this is, not great. You shouldn't be doing this. This is horrible. God hates this, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there he is. And, or you have a guy walking saying, you're in America. I said, yeah, from America. And in very broken English, like, I want to go to America to have sex with women. It's like the religion's there, but the religion is an overlay from who he is just as a guy, as a man, right? You have had to effectively acknowledge that what you've been told, God, man, this puts in the mind of, I guess, my own political identity thing, where you reach this point where you realize, oh my God, I've been lied to. And you become who you are, almost as a basis of what the lies that you were effectively told and the renunciation of those lies. No, it's fascinating. I appreciate this. Thank you for joining me for this. Kayse Melone. And I want to make sure I get it right. Kayse Melone. She runs the Kayse Melone Show, described as a podcast for free thinkers, free spirits, covering culture, religion, and politics. She broadcasts live Sunday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. That's on YouTube, correct? YouTube and Spotify.
YouTube and Twitch.
And Twitch, the video game thing. Kayse, I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
You too.
Bye-bye.